another segment of MLK Uncut. We are broadcasting through Facebook Live as well as YouTube channel Church Love 333, so we can have our own record of these broadcasts. So we are picking back up with day 15. That's how many days we have been into this book and reading aloud. Where do we go from here? Chaos or community? And we're calling this series the MLK Uncut. A lot of people believe that they know who MLK was, what MLK stood for, and I'm really finding out that many people have not read his own writings to really see where his heart was. So as we go into this today and as we tackle this today, we're going to be talking about modern day cycles and challenges. That's where we are in his reading, modern day cycles and challenges. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started in this reading. I'm going to take a minute to invite some people in to the broadcast. And hopefully they'll be able to join us. Or they can watch the replay as always. Replays are good. Hope everybody is having a great and wonderful day. All right. See some names popping up that I haven't seen before. So we'll also try to invite you in to the broadcast. And thank you for those who have been watching these and sharing them with your family and friends. All right, so let's go ahead and have a word of prayer. I see my YouTube live stream is buffering quite a bit, so I hope it will be able to hold on today. Heavenly Father, thank you for your goodness. Thank you for another day. Thank you for life, health, strength, the ability to breathe, the ability to speak, the ability to think for ourselves. God, I pray that even as we go through these readings today, that you would anoint us, that you would give us your wisdom, your knowledge, and your understanding, that you would allow everything to work technologically well, so that the message that is here as we read along can be communicated. In Jesus' name, let us be the change that we wish to see in the earth. Amen. So here we go. No Negro escapes the cycles of modern slavery. Even the new Negro middle class often finds itself in the ghettoized housing and in jobs at the mercy of the white world. Some of the most tragic figures in our society now are the Negro company vice presidents who sit with no authority or influence because they were merely employed for window dressing in an effort to win the Negro market, or to compel with federal regulations in Title VII of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. Let me read that again. Negro company vice presidents who sit with no authority or influence because they were merely employed for window dressing or in an effort to win the Negro market or to comply with federal regulations in Title VII of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. So MLK here, he starts out in this section by talking about cycles and modern day challenges. And one of the challenges that he specifically starts out with saying is that even Black people who find themselves, quote unquote, as George Jefferson would say, moving on up, right? They still, in some ways, find themselves at the mercy of white America, or they find themselves at the mercy of those who lead, right, those companies. In his day, he says some of them were merely employed for window dressing. In our day, we would say some of them are tokens, or some of them are figureheads. They don't really have any real power, but they are often used as a symbol to say, hey, see, we have diversity. We have this one Black person in our company, or we have diversity. We have this one Black person who's allowed into whatever organization it is. And then, you know, he says that sometimes that is used in an effort to win the Negro market. Now, I know that to be true because I often hear, even in 2016, African Americans say, well, I wouldn't be supporting X, Y, and Z, but because they have this person starring in it, or because this person is playing in it, or because, you know, this person is representing it and they're Black American, that's the only reason why I support it. That's the only reason why I would buy it. That's the only reason why I would go watch it. So MLK points out something that was going on even in the 1960s, where you had Black Americans, quote unquote, moving on up, but oftentimes they didn't really have any real authority in that move. And oftentimes they were used to attract the Negro market, as he calls it, into something, or they were often used to comply with federal law. So one of the things that I think he spends a lot of time pointing out, just kind of throughout his writing, is that inviting one or two Black people in is not integration. I know we think it is, but he saw it as more of a situation of tokenism, to say, or to give excuse or to give reason as to why more African Americans or whatever were not involved in certain fields. So just to say that, you know, we're a fully integrated society by allowing one or two people to come into whether it's a job, whether it's a field of industry, MLK made a point over his writings continually to say that just having one or two people enter into a field does not necessarily mean that we have progressed, or it does not necessarily mean that we have integrated, right? So that's one of the things that he starts out today's writing with. And so being a Negro in America is not a comfortable existence. It means being a part of the company of the bruised, the battered, the scarred, and the defeated. Being a Negro in America means trying to smile when you want to cry. It means trying to hold on to physical life amid psychological death. It means the pain of watching your children grow up with clouds of inferiority in their mental skies. It means having your legs cut off and then condemned for being a cripple. It means seeing your mother and father spiritually murdered by the slings and arrows of daily exploitation, and then being hated for being an orphan. Being a Negro in America means listening to suburban politicians talk eloquently against open housing while arguing in the same breath that they are not racist. It means being harried by day and haunted by night by a nagging sense of nobodiness and constantly fighting to be saved from the poison of bitterness. It means the ache and anguish of living in so many situations where hopes unborn have died. So he's talking about the reality that even though you may, excuse me, in a sense move up, or even though you may be in the middle class or the upper class, there are certain things about Blackness that you can't escape. We do have a whole generation of people who are literally, and I do mean literally, trying to run from their Blackness. They're saying stuff like, I'm a new Black. They're saying things like, you know, we're beyond that, when the reality is they're delusional. I'm just going to call it like it is. We are not, unfortunately, beyond. And we can't get beyond in denial, right? We can't get beyond until we actually acknowledge what is happening in this country. Ignoring it and pretending and acting like we don't have some serious racial inequality, or we don't have some serious economic disparities to deal with does no good. All right, so I'm going to keep reading. After 348 years of racial injustice, it is still the Negro's burden and America's shame. Yet for his own inner health and outer functioning, the Negro is called upon to be as resourceful and productive and as responsible as those who have not known such oppression and exploitation. This is the Negro's dilemma. He who starts behind in a race must forever remain behind or run faster than the man in front. What a dilemma. It is a call to do the impossible. It is enough to cause the Negro to give up in despair. And yet there are times when life demands the perpetual doing of the impossible. The life of our slave forebears is eternal testimony to the ability of men to achieve the impossible. So too, we must embark upon this difficult, trying, and sometimes bewildering course. With a dynamic will, we must transform our minus into a plus and move on aggressively through the storms of injustice and jostling winds of daily handicaps toward the beaconing lights of fulfillment. Our dilemma is serious and our handicaps are real, but equally real is the power of a creative will and its ability to give us the courage to go on in spite of. And it goes back to what another writer said is not just the fact of all of the things that have come against Black America, all of the things that have really kind of beat Black America down, all of the things that have said there's no way in the world Black America is quote unquote 228 years behind in wealth, and yet we still are here. That's a miracle in and of itself. And so I appreciate the fact that MLK is not in denial, right? He's not saying that we don't have issues. He's not saying that we don't have handicaps. He's not saying that we were not put in the race for progress or the race for economic empowerment late, right? We were the economic empowerment. We were the money. We were the property. And anybody who chooses to ignore that part of Black history is delusional, just bottom line. So when you take a group of people and you move them from being seen as beasts of burden and being seen as property and money to them now being treated as they are supposed to be or should have been from the beginning, as human beings capable of building wealth, of economic empowerment, even though we're 228 years in the gap of wealth, the reality is life has demanded Black Americans perpetually do the impossible. And in spite of perpetually doing the impossible, which is actually to catch up to other people groups in this society in terms of economic empowerment, you still have some people who are upset that we're even that far along, even though it's a 228-year gap in economy. So, like he said, equally real, we have a dilemma, right, of handicaps economically, but equally real is the power of a creative will and its ability to give us the courage to go on in spite of. Once when Old Bull, the Norwegian violinist, was giving a concert in Paris, his A string snapped. Instead of stopping, Old Bull transposed the composition and finished the concert on 3 strings. This is what the Negro confronts. Through years of unjust oppression and unmerited suffering, our A strings of opportunity have snapped. But the performance of our lives must go on, and without self-pity or surrender, we must go forward on 3 strings. Our lives will be comparable to the Battle of Marengo. In the morning, an obvious defeat. In the afternoon, a resounding victory. It is something of what Langston Hughes expresses in his poem, Mother to Son. Well, son, I'll tell you, life for me ain't been no crystal stair. It's had tacks in it and splinters and boards torn up and places with no carpet on the floor, bare. But all the time, I've been a climbing and reaching landings and turning corners and sometimes going in the dark where there ain't been no light. So boy, don't you turn back. Don't you sit down on the steps, 'cause you find it's kinda hard. Don't you fall now, for I still be going, honey. I still climbing. For life and life for me ain't been no crystal stair. This is the challenge facing every Negro. It is this determination to keep climbing that will transform the dark into light. What then are the challenges that the Negro faces as a result of his dilemma? There is always the understandable temptation to seek negative and self-destruction solutions. Some seek a passive way out by yielding to the feeling of inferiority, or by allowing the floodgates of defeat to open with an avalanche of despair, or by dropping out of school, or by turning to the escape valves of narcotics and alcohol. Others seek a defiant way out through antisocial behavior, overt delinquency, and gang warfare. They release their pent-up vindictiveness on the whole society. Meanness becomes their dominating characteristic. They trust no one and do not expect others to trust them. Still others seek to deal with the dilemma through the path of isolation. They have the fantasy of a separate Black state or a separate Black nation within the nation. This approach is the most cynical and nihilistic of all, because it is based on a loss of faith in the possibilities of American democracy. The shattered dreams and blasted hopes of the Negro's daily life provide the psychological and sociological explanation for the choice by some of negative paths of escape. A society that has treated a whole race of people as flotsam and jetsam in the river of life cannot expect all of them to grow up healthy and well balanced. But in spite of these explanations, the Negro cannot constructively deal with his dilemma through negative strategies. In spite of uncertainties and vicissitudes, we must develop the courage to confront the negatives of circumstance with the positives of inner determination. One positive response to our dilemma is to develop our own sense of somebodyness. The tragedy of slavery and segregation is that they instilled in the Negro a disastrous sense of his own worthlessness. To overcome this terrible feeling of being less than human, the Negro must assert for all to hear and see a majestic sense of worth. There is such a thing as a desegregated mind. We must no longer allow the outer chains of an oppressive society to shackle our minds. With courage and fearlessness, we must set out daringly to stabilize our egos. This alone will give us a confirmation of our roots and a validation of our worth. This sense of somebodyness means the refusal to be ashamed of being Black. Our children must be taught to stand tall with their heads proudly lifted. We need not be duped into purchasing bleaching creams that promise to make us lighter. We need not to process our hair to make it appear straight. Whether some men, Black and white, realize it or not, Black people are very beautiful. Life's piano can only produce the melodies of brotherhood when it is recognized that the Black keys are the basic, necessary, and as beautiful as the white keys. The Negro, through self-acceptance and self-appreciation, will one day cause white America to see that integration is not an obstacle, but an opportunity to participate in the beauty of diversity. Courage, the determination not to be overwhelmed by any object, that power of the mind capable of sloughing off the things of the past, will be the Negro's most potent weapon in achieving self-respect. Something of the inner spirit of our slave forebears must be pursued today. From the inner depths of our being, we must sing with them. Before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. This spirit, this drive, this sense of somebodyness is the first and most vital step that Black people must take in dealing with his dilemma. A second important step that the Negro must take is to work passionately for group identity. This does not mean group isolation or group exclusivity. It means the kind of group consciousness that Negroes need in order to participate more meaningfully at all levels of the life of our nation. Group unity necessarily involves group trust and reconciliation. One of the most serious effects of the Negro's ego has been his frequent loss of respect for himself and for others. He ends up with an ambivalence towards his own kind. To overcome this tragic conflict, it will be necessary for the Negro to find a new self-image. Only by being reconciled to ourselves will we be able to build upon the resources we already have at our disposal. Let me say this. Anytime I see other people groups trying to pit Black people against Black people, I don't care if it's media, music, economy, business, that's the devil. MLK has a serious point here, and he's talking about the power of group unity. So my challenge to you would be, pay attention to how many times, especially media, pits Black people against Black people. Whether it be from an ideological perspective, whether it be from a justice perspective, whether it be from a political perspective, there is something to be said about Black people being encouraged to have ambivalence towards one another. So I'll just let you think about that one. Too many Negroes are jealous of other Negroes' successes and progress. Too many Negro organizations are warring against each other with a claim to absolute truth. The Pharaohs had a favorite and effective strategy to keep their slaves in bondage. Keep them fighting amongst themselves. I'm going to say that again. The Pharaohs had a favorite and effective strategy to keep their slaves in bondage. Keep them fighting amongst themselves. I'm going to say it one more time. The Pharaohs had a favorite and effective strategy to keep their slaves in bondage. Keep them fighting among themselves. The divide and conquer technique has been a potent weapon in the arsenal of oppression. But when slaves unite, the Red Seas of history open and the Egypts of slavery crumble. This plea for unity is not a call for uniformity. There must always be healthy debate. There will be inevitable differences of opinion. The dilemma that the Negro confronts is so complex and monumental that its solutions will of necessity involve a diversified approach. But Negroes can differ and still unite around common goals. Another one that needs to be repeated. Black people, Negroes, can still differ and still unite around common goals. There are already structured forces in the Negro community that can serve as the basis for building a powerful unified front. So what are some of those structured forces that MLK is talking about? The Negro Church, the Negro Press, the Negro fraternities and sororities, the Negro professional associations. Let's see. The Negro Church, he wrote this in 1967. The Negro Church, is it still a structured force that can be served as a basis for building a powerful united front? Just ask yourself that question. The Negro Press, most of the press that we did have that was run by Black people in this country was sold. Negro fraternities and sororities actually answer to white fraternities and sororities. Negro professional associations, I do believe there's still some of those that are still founded and run by Black people. So structural forces, clearly Houston, we have a problem. But MLK was saying in his day that these forces were still intact, that they could have been used, right, to build a united front with. We must admit that these forces have never given their full resources to the cause of Negro liberation. There are still too many Negro churches that are so absorbed in a future good over yonder that they condition their members to adjust to the present evils over here. Too many Negro newspapers have veered away from their traditional role as protest organs agitating for social change and have turned to the sensational and the conservative in place of the substantive and the militant. Too many Negro social and professional groups have degenerated, into snobbishness and a preoccupation with frivolities and trivial activity. But the failures of the past must not be an excuse for the inaction of the present and the future. These groups must be mobilized and motivated. This form of group unity can do infinitely more to liberate the Negro than any action of individuals. We have been oppressed as a group, and we must overcome that oppression as a group. So MLK does say that there were some structures in place that would help Black people build a united front. But as I just said, think about, what do those structures look like now? What has happened since his assassination that has weakened those particular structures that he spoke of? He said the Negro Church, the Negro Press, fraternities and sororities, and professional associations. We'll continue reading. Through this form of group unity, we can begin a constructive program which will vigorously seek to improve our personal standards. It is not a sign of weakness, but a sign of maturity to rise to the level of self-criticism. Through group unity, we must convey to one another that our women must be respected, that life is too precious to be destroyed in a Saturday night brawl or a gang execution. Through community agencies and religious institutions, we must develop a positive program through which Black youth can become adjusted to urban living and improve their general level of behavior. While I strongly disagree with their separatist Black supremacist philosophy, I have nothing but admiration for what our Muslim brothers have done to rehabilitate ex-convicts, dope addicts, and men and women who through despair and self-hatred have sunk to moral degeneracy. This must be attempted on a much larger scale and without the negative overtones that accompany Black Muslimism. So you'll hear many people talk about, oh, Martin Luther King was against the Nation of Islam, da 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 da. But here we're seeing in his own words that he actually admired what they were doing for the Black community. The rehabilitation that was taking place in the Black community because of what they were doing. He didn't agree with them on spiritual ideology, but in terms of what they were doing to rehabilitate men and women in the Black community, he was in agreement with that. Let's keep reading. Since crime often grows out of a sense of futility and hopelessness, Negro parents, in spite of almost insuperable economic obstacles, must be urged to give their children the love, attention, and sense of belonging that an oppressive society deprives them of. While not ignoring the fact that the ultimate way to diminish our problems of crime, family disorganization, illegitimacy, and so forth will have to be found through a government program to help the frustrated Negro male find his true masculinity by placing him on his own two economic feet. We must do all within our power to approach these goals ourselves. Let me just say this. Let me pause. 2016, hear me clearly. In 2016, regardless of who wins the election, the reality is Black America is going to have to help Black America. I know, shocking, right? Regardless of who wins, Black America is going to have to take responsibility for Black America. I know. Think about it for a moment. While MLK notes that we are where we are because of systems hundreds of years ago that we did not establish, while MLK notes that we have been at a disadvantage, while MLK notes that we are behind in the economic race, he also notes that we must do what is in our power to empower ourselves. And when you look at both sides of the coin, and you see that neither side of the coin has any intention of empowering your community, then what you decide is we have to empower ourselves. Whether people like it or not, whether people agree or not, whether people ridicule us or not, there are certain things that we have to do as Black Americans to empower ourselves, to empower our communities, to fulfill the goals, regardless of if we get help from the outside or not, or regardless if our government does what they are supposed to do or should have done. The reality is our government does not feel obligated to do anything, even though they are responsible. They don't feel obligated to fix it. So when you're living in a society or you're living in a country that knows it has guilt but feels no obligation to fix what they started, then you have to move from what they did wrong to whether or not they fix it, because we know God is a just God, so He gonna fix it real good for all of us eventually. Whether or not they fix it, because you still have to live and you still have to prosper and you still have to grow, there has to come a place in your community, the Black community, where we say we're going to do all in our power to meet the goals of our community, to meet the health of our community, right? So we can't just leave it on, oh yeah, Jesus is going to fix it. But we can't leave it on a government that has shown us better than it can tell us that it has no real intention of fixing the very real inequalities that exist. That's just the truth of the matter. And so I want to tell, especially spiritual leaders, I want to tell spiritual leaders to stop lying. I want to tell spiritual leaders to stop lying on God. Stop lying on God. Stop lying to people and telling them that God has said candidate X or candidate Y or candidate Q is going to get us out of the mess that we're in. Stop lying on God. because he's going to call your bluff in just a second. So again, even though we know historically that Black America did not create the conditions that they're in, the reality is we have enough of Black America now, we have enough of the Black community that can come together and make it our goal that we're going to take care of our community, that we're going to take care of our community. So moving forward, let's take a look at what he says. There is a third thing that the Negro must do to grapple with his dilemma. We must make full and constructive use of the freedom we already possess. We must not wait until the day of full emancipation before we set out to make our individual and collective contributions to the life of our nation. Even though slavery and segregation were designed to make the Negro adjust to mediocrity, we must work to aspire to excellence. This is particularly relevant for the young Negro. Realism impels us to admit that many older Negroes have been so scarred by long years of oppression, by limited or no education, that they can no longer be expected to achieve excellence. There are also some Negro youth who have faced so many closed doors and so many crippling defeats that they have lost their motivation. For those youth who are alienated from the routines of work, there should be subsidized work situations which permit flexibility so that they can be carried along until they can manage the demands of the typical workplace. But there are a host of Negro youth who still have the will and the capacity to achieve excellence in their various fields of endeavor. Doors of opportunity are gradually opening now that were not open to our mothers and fathers. The great challenge is to prepare ourselves to enter those doors as they open. We already have the inspiring examples of those who, through determination, have broken through the shackles of circumstance. From an old slave cabin in Virginia's hills, Booker T. Washington rose to become one of America's greatest leaders. From the oppressive hills of Gordon County, Georgia, and the arms of a mother who could neither read nor write, Roland Hayes emerged as a singer whose melodious voice was heard in the palaces of kings and the mansions of queens. Coming from a poverty-stricken environment in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Marian Anderson became a distinguished contralto, so honored by the world that Toscanini said a voice like hers comes only once in a century. And Sibelius exclaimed that his roof was too low for such a voice. From crippling beginnings, George Washington Carver created for himself an imperishable niche in the annals of science. From the racist bastion of Laurel, Mississippi, Leontine Price, with a majestic soprano and brilliant dramatic talent, rose to the heights of the Metropolitan Opera. Ralph J. Bunch, the grandson of a slave preacher, sits near the top on the ranks of world government. There was a star in the poetic sky, and then came James Weldon Johnson, Paul Laurence Dunbar, Count T. Cullen, Claude McKay, and Langston Huston to reach up and touch it. As musical artists and performers, Harry Belafonte singing the folk songs of every culture, Sammy Davis exclaiming, "Yes, I can," Mahalia Jackson belting out the powerful gospel songs of the Black church, Ray Charles sighing the blues, Duke Ellington pouring forth his superb jazz, and Sidney Poitier acting with powerful talent, have all reached the zenith of achievement and fame. The eloquent pens of writers like W.E.B. Du Bois, Richard Wright, Ralph Ellison, and James Baldwin have left their literary marks on the sands of time. From years of exclusion and denial, Joe Louis, Jack Johnson, Muhammad Ali, Jackie Robinson, Roy Campanella, Don Newcomb, Willie Mays, Henry Aaron, Frank Robinson, James Brown, Bill Russell, Wilt Chamberlain, Jesse Owens, Buddy Young, Althea Gibson, and Arthur Ashe all rose to the heights of the athletic world. These are only a few of the examples which remind us that in spite of our lack of full freedom, we can make a contribution here and now. Not all men are called to specialized or professional jobs. Even fewer rise to the heights of genius. Many are called to be laborers in factories, fields, and streets. But no work is insignificant. All labor that uplifts humanity has dignity and worth and should be pursued with respect for excellence. This clear onward drive to make full and creative use of the opportunities already available will be immeasurable value in helping us to deal constructively with our dilemma. The fourth challenge we face is to unite around powerful action programs that eradicate vestiges of racial injustice. We will be greatly misled if we feel that the problem will work itself out. Structures of evil do not crumble by passive waiting. I'll say it again. Structures of evil do not crumble by passive waiting. If history teaches anything, it is that evil is recalcitrant and determined, and never voluntarily relinquishes hold short of an almost fanatical resistance. Evil must be attacked by counteracting persistence, by the day-to-day assault of the battering rams of justice. We must get rid of the false notion that there is some miraculous quality in the flow of time that inevitably heals all evils. There is only one thing certain about time, and that is that it waits for no one. If it is not used constructively, it passes you by. In this generation, the children of darkness are still shrewder than the children of light. They are always zealous and conscientious in using their time for evil purposes. If they want to preserve segregation and tyranny, they do not wait on time. They make their time their fellow conspirator. If they want to defeat a fair housing bill, they don't say to the public, be patient, wait on time, and our cause will win. Rather, they use time spending big money, disseminating half-truths to confuse the popular mind. But the forces of light cautiously wait, patiently pray, and timidly act. So we end up with a double destruction, with destructive violence of the bad people and the destructive silence of the good people. We've seen it in our generation over and over and over again. The destructive silence of the good people. I think I said that earlier this week with some incidences that are happening now in the Christian community exposing racism. Again, in the Christian community. Where were the voices of condemnation of racism in the Christian community, the white Christian community? I haven't seen them yet. So we end up with the destructive actions of bad people, and we end up with the destructive silence of the good people. We cannot be silent. He goes on to say, equally fallacious is the notion that ethical appeals and persuasion alone will bring about justice. This does not mean that ethical appeals must not be made. It simply means that those appeals must be undergirded by some form of constructive coercive power. And here we go. All right. So we're going to restart our Facebook Live here. Thank you all for being patient. All right. We are back. So, again, the destructive violence of the bad people and the destructive silence of the good people are both destructive. We're talking about challenges, dilemmas. And one of the dilemmas for Black America is to unite around powerful action programs and recognizing that the structures of evil do not crumble by passive waiting, is what MLK has said. He said, you have the side of evil does not wait. They use whatever capacity, whatever measures they can. Big money, disseminating half-truths to confuse the popular mind. But then he says, on the other side of that, you have those who are on the side of justice, who will cautiously wait, patiently pray, and timidly act. So, as he says here, if the Negro does not add persistent pressure to his patient plea, he will end up empty-handed. In a not too distant yesterday, Booker T. Washington tried this path of patient persuasion. I do not share the notion that he was an Uncle Tom who compromised for the sake of keeping the peace. Washington sincerely believed that if the South was not pushed too hard, that if the South was not forced to do something that it did not for the moment want to do, it would voluntarily rally in the end to the Negro's cause. Washington's error was that he underestimated the structures of evil. And I'm going to say that right now, that is a part of the issue of what we see happening with both political parties right now. There is a serious underestimation of the structures of evil that are sitting behind both of these candidates. There's an underestimation of the structures of evil that are sitting behind both of these candidates. And you can come back to this video after the election and mark my words. He underestimated the structures of evil. As a consequence, his philosophy of pressureless persuasion only served as a springboard for racist Southerners to dive into deeper and more ruthless oppression of the Negro. I'm going to say that again. As a consequence of underestimating the structures of evil at the time, it gave racist Southerners an ability to go deeper and become more ruthless with the oppression of Black people. So everybody's looking around like, I don't understand why David Duke is running for office again. Where did he come from? Former knight of the Ku Klux Klan. I don't understand why, people are just so bold again, almost as if we're back in 1964 with their racism. I don't understand why the White Lives Matter people have just decided to go stand in front of a historical neighborhood and protest in front of the NAACP founded by Black and white people talking about White Lives Matter. I don't understand why. I'm going to tell you why. underestimating the structures of evil, underestimating the roots of it, underestimating the fact that these people did not die. Their ideology did not die. They passed it on. They passed it on. So, as he says here, so every ethical appeal to the conscience of the white man must be accomplished by nonviolent pressure. If first-class citizenship is to become a reality for the Negro, he must, through a powerful action program, assume the primary responsibility for making it so. In other words, you cannot depend on other people to have more energy about your rights than you do. I'm going to say that again. You cannot depend on other people groups and other people to have more energy, putting more energy behind ensuring that you have equal rights than you do or than your community does. The only answer to the delay, double dealing, tokenism, and racism that we still confront is through mass nonviolent action and the ballot. At times, these may seem too slow and inadequate, but they are the only real tools that we have. Our course of action must lie neither in passively relying on persuasion nor in actively succumbing to violence, but in higher synthesis that reconciles the truths of these two opposites while avoiding the inadequacies and ineffectiveness of both. With the person relying on persuasion, we must agree that we will not violently destroy life or property, but we must balance this by agreeing with the person of violence that evil must be resisted. By so doing, we avoid the non-resistance of the former and the violent resistance of the latter. With non-violent resistance, we need not submit to any wrong, nor need we resort to violence in order to right a wrong. So in today's closing here, MLK is basically is saying that you have people that want to respond in non-violent action, and then you also have people that want to respond in violent rebellion. And he said you have to synthesize both of these in order to get somewhere, right? This is what he's saying. He's saying you must agree, if we're going to move forward, you must agree that you will not violently destroy life or property, but with the person that wants to resist by violence, you must agree with them that evil should be resisted. So evil should be resisted, but you don't have to destroy life and property to resist evil. That's the synthesis. That's the coming together. So I don't have to destroy life or property to resist evil. I need to begin to use the tools that I have in order to resist evil. Again, he says, especially in this day and age, the ballot. And we're not talking about the two major candidates, but really the ballots in your local community. Who are your judges up for election? Who are the people that control economy in your community that are up for election? Who are the sheriffs that are up for election? These are the people, some of them, that you want to be having conversations with. As a whole, not just one person sitting down and meeting with one of them and saying, oh, what do you have for the community? No, the community should be coming together and saying, bring these people to the floor, bring these candidates to the floor, and let's see what they have in store for our community. Let's see how do they plan to address systemic issues? How do they plan to address over sentencing? How do they plan to address when juveniles in our communities commit crimes? What are their plans? What do they believe? because just voting names on a ballot and you don't know anything about the candidates, you don't know anything about their records, you don't know anything about how they have treated Black America in the past, there's time to find out in the local elections that will be happening also at the same time as the major election who these people are, and using your collective voice to say, you know what, we're going to decide as a community what's best for us and who should be in office. I do know some communities that are already doing that, and I say hats off and bravo to you. But I would suggest, you know, that other communities do that like pronto. It's the end of August. You got some time. You got at least 60 days to begin to pool together the community, Black community resources, and find out who these candidates are. What's their records? What are their plans? What are their concerns for Black America, especially around the concerns of your community? So I pray that you got something out of today. This is part 2. If you're just tuning in, please go back and watch part 1. And we are going to continue on Monday with day 16. And we're going to be talking about what MLK calls the American Racial Revolution. The American Racial Revolution. So I hope you got something out of today's reading. Hope that you will share. And I hope that you will be thinking about how you can be the change in your community. Happy Friday. Take care and God bless. Thank you for your time, and I hope that you are having a wonderful, wonderful day. And again, we will be back with day 16. Day 16. Take care, and God bless.